I'm sitting here in the 1935 Bugatti Aerolithé recreation that the Guild finished in 2013. One of the questions I get most often is how it was that we managed to work with the magnesium skin. This particular alloy is called Electron. It is 93% magnesium and 7% various other metals. Today we are going to answer everyone's question. We are going to show you exactly how we worked with the magnesium. We're going to show you different metal forming techniques, and we're also going to show you its properties in comparison with aluminum. I hope that everybody is really excited because this is a long time coming.
I'm Dave Grainger. I'm the president of the Guild of Automotive Restorers, a restoration company that's been in business for over 30 years. We have restored over 2,500 cars, trucks, and other vintage vehicles. If you're curious about what goes on behind the scenes of a large restoration shop, join us at the Guild's Classics.
Okay, I'm Al, and today we are going to be playing with some aluminum and some magnesium. We're going to make a little dish out of the aluminum and then do the exact same thing out of magnesium just to show the difference between working with the two materials. First big difference is that magnesium is a lot lighter than aluminum. This is a 6" by 6" by 1/16 inch sheet of aluminum, and it weighs, give or take, 100 grams. The magnesium, however, same thickness, 1/16 of an inch, 6" by 6" weighs 64 grams, so roughly 2/3 of the weight. The other thing about the magnesium is it is incredibly rigid. This is the aluminum. That's soft. It's 3003, I believe H13, so half hard. This is a standard sort of thickness that I would be using to work with any sort of non-structural body work in a car or an airplane. The magnesium, however, I can try to bend it, and it doesn't want to. It'll flex, but it bends right back. I know that's not exactly a scientific demonstration, but trust me, it is very, very rigid stuff, which is great once the part is made, but it makes it slightly challenging to make the part. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out a circle. So we're gonna start out with this little guy. We're gonna use basic metalworking techniques, no special equipment, to form a dish. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna stretch out the center and we're gonna shrink the edge down. We're not gonna use any special shrinking machines. We're just gonna use a mallet and a stump, maybe a shot bag. Okay, so we have our 6" disc. We've got a plastic mallet. Wooden mallet works fine. Hammer, anything you got. And we have a, this happens to be a cherry stump, but a chunk of wood with a dish cut in it. And we're just gonna start by laying it down in here, giving it a good smack. And we pull these little tucks, these little wrinkles, they're called tucks, and that is what allows us to shrink the outside. What's happening is that wrinkle is up here on the stump, and when I smack it down, it crushes in on itself. The metal gets thicker, the circumference gets smaller, and it allows us to end up with a dish. That is one of the basic premises of all the metal shaping we do. We can do two things. We can shrink the metal, or we can stretch it out if we want to change how much metal's there. And then once we've shrunk and stretched, we can change the shape by bending it. And now I have a dish. It's relatively shallow. It's still a little bit bumpy, but that's the basic principle for doing almost all of this metal shaping. If I wanted to go further, I could anneal it, which is something we can cover another day. But basically you heat it up and cool it down, and it relaxes the crystalline structure in the aluminum, making it dead soft and allowing us to just keep going with our moving the metal around. As you work it, you can feel that it gets harder and harder. The second it starts feeling hard, anneal it. It makes your life easier. Over here, we have our magnesium. Yeah, so the thing about magnesium is it's a stronger metal. It's lighter, but it's more rigid, which means it can deform elastically, like a spring, where it stretches and then bends back to a certain degree. But once it starts getting into its plastic deformation, which is where it bends and stays like silly putty, it cracks. So we have to work with it a little more carefully. Now I'm not gonna just go hit this, because what's gonna happen if I try to just hit this is I'm gonna have to hit it really hard. We're gonna get a ding and a crack in the middle of it, and I can show you that with a small scrap. Okay, so we've got our sample of magnesium, and again, magnesium is extremely hard. So I'm gonna put my ears on. We're gonna smack it. If I keep going, it will start to crack. I'm hitting it about as hard as I can to get it to move, and we've got a nice crack in there, and that's not gonna work for shaping metal. Okay, so because the magnesium is brittle, I can't shape it the same way as I shape the aluminum. I'm going to have to soften the material. Now, technically, the right metallurgical way to anneal this is to put it in an oven at 600 degrees for about an hour and then cool it, and it gets a little bit softer. We're not making space shuttles, so we can warm it up and sort of work it warm to hot, and generally you won't have any trouble at all. So I've got a pair of pliers to hold it because it's going to get warm. Got an oxyacetylene torch, just a little guy. Gonna turn on the acetylene. Put the oxygen in it. There we go. And then we are going to just kind of warm things up. So you can see we're already getting a whole lot of shape in here. And you can see that it also hasn't been all that difficult. And other than a little bit of heat from the torch, we haven't been using anything special except something to hit with and something to hit on. Now with the magnesium, because I'm working it a lot more gently, I'm not trying to get those big tucks in here and then crush them out, because I risk cracking stuff if I try to move that much metal that quickly. But by localizing the heat, just gently tapping it into the stump, I'm getting the exact same effect. Cool this off in a little bit of water so I don't burn my hand. And take a look. We've got about the same amount of crown. Now we might as well take these over to the English wheel and get them really polished. If you don't happen to have an English wheel, you can actually work this nice and carefully on a smooth part of the stump, back and forth, and get it very, very, very close. It just takes a little more time, so that if you were to sand it afterwards, you could end up with a perfect thing. But we've got the English wheel, so we might as well use it briefly to smooth these guys out, and we'll have two nice little hemispheres, exactly the same amount of material, one in aluminum, one in magnesium. This one's going to be stronger, and it's going to be 2/3 the weight. Now, the first thing we want to do is sort of get a sense of what our radius is. This is just a homemade radius gauge that I made with a compass and a piece of aluminum and a set of shears and a file, and then I punched in the different sizes. So that's roughly a 5-inch radius. That is a 5-inch-ish radius, so we're close enough. We'll pull this flat anvil out, put the proper anvil in, and then spin the wheel up till this guy just goes in there. Don't need a lot of force on it. Let me just go back and forth, trying not to pinch our hands. It really hurts. It's kind of hard to hold on to something like this. So what this is doing, we've got a nice smoothish bottom anvil, a nice smoothish top anvil. They're set about a metal thickness apart. So every high spot, every bump gets knocked down by this. Every low spot gets pushed up by the radius anvil. And we end up with a nice smooth part. Now, I don't have that much tension on it because I want to smooth right now. I don't want to stretch. So So I'm just, again, trying to pull up the low spots and knock down the high spots with the wheel. As I go around, you can hear it and feel it getting smoother and smoother. And then we have a very nice, smooth surface. This is the magnesium, again, same thickness. When you're doing just final metal finishing on something like this with the wheel, it's very similar to the aluminum. It's extremely cooperative. In some ways, it even smooths itself out better. And again, this is a nice smooth surface. This is ideal to use for to switch now to an abrasive and just get everything absolutely totally smooth if I wanted a polished part, or you could paint this. Now, these are obviously two shallow dishes, but they demonstrate basic metal forming techniques, both with the aluminum and with the magnesium. If I were to make a headlight bucket, I would want this to stretch way back. I would actually just keep doing what I just did. I could do it with the same hand tools. I would just want to anneal it. And we're gonna go over annealing another day. But once you soften the aluminum, you can just keep working it as if it was a brand new piece. You can shrink it, you can stretch it, you can do pretty much anything to it. You can weld it, you can make large, seamless, complicated shapes, all with the basic shrinking and stretching techniques and smoothing out techniques that I just demonstrated. There's piles and piles of tools that help you with different specific stuff, but you can do everything with the simplest tools. So you don't need to buy a bunch of expensive stuff to do good work. You just need to have some material and some time and not be worried about screwing up, and you'll get there. All that said, there's the reason you don't find magnesium in cars these days is extremely expensive. Again, you'll find magnesium in some race cars. You'll find magnesium in cast alloy magnesium rims because it's lighter than aluminum but really strong. And when you've got a tire that's spinning really fast, that has a lot of mass and carries a lot of energy, and so you want that to be nice and light. It's bumping up and down and spinning around, and so the lighter that is, the better it can be. But because it's difficult to form sort of by hand and also extremely expensive, there's not a weight premium that makes that affordable in cars. You do, however, find it more in aerospace, where it really matters how light and strong things are. Specific components generally are cast, not as often formed because of the restrictions that magnesium has in forming. Usually when they are formed, they come right out of the oven, go into a heated press, get smashed at the optimum temperature, and are set to cool. And that is a high-end, expensive mass production technique that you're not going to find except on specific parts that absolutely need it.
Initially, I really didn't think that this car was made out of magnesium. I thought, well, you know, that might have been just Ettore Bugatti being a showman, and it was likely made out of aluminum. But as we did more research, as we got into the actual techniques and practices of the 1930s, as far as handling most metals were concerned, we started to realize that, you know, there were a lot of masters around in those days. And the more we found out about techniques handling actual magnesium from the 1920s and early 30s, the more it became not just likely, but probable that Ettore Bugatti was right. He did make the car out of magnesium. So once we had sort of ascertained that that was the direction we were going to go, we had to go about finding a source for magnesium. We almost fell over when we found out for a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet, it was like over $3,000. Because we had computed that we need 20, 25, maybe 30 sheets to make this car body. And this was the result. There was 2.5, 3 years of actual fabrication of the body panels outside of everything else that we had to do. So this is an accomplishment that very few other shops have ever tried, and there's only one other magnesium body Bugatti. It's a very much simpler racing style car. So I think that this will be sort of the watermark for a long time to come.